One of my favorite things about all of these episodes is how unique each and every one is. For the most part, I'm completely unfamiliar with all of these studios, so I have no idea what to expect from the stories they tell and the style they choose to tell them with. Plus the fact that they're all separate from the canon, it's nice to be able to relax and take in a story with no overarching narrative or impact on the larger galaxy. For Volume 1, I found myself enjoying, for the most part, each and every episode to some extent, although there were only a few that stood out to me. For the majority of the episodes, I enjoyed it and then moved on to the next, with no real desire to watch it again. I always value the emotion and connection created in visual stories, which is hard to do in 15 minutes with brand new characters. Overall, I found this second volume to be much stronger than the first. I was excited now that the studios were from all over the world, which meant a wider variety of stories and styles, and it definitely lived up to my expectations. Each one felt very different from the others, and they all had their own specific focus and intent when it came to telling these stories. Starting with The Sith, this was another one of those that was enjoyable, but I don't know if it had anything that makes me really want to rewatch it. The episode follows Lola, a former Sith, now painter, as she is pursued by her former master. This one was enjoyable, but it also felt like there was just too much going on at times. I thought this art style was really unique, unlike anything I had ever seen before. The majority of white background to start off the episode caught me off guard, and at times it did make the environment around the characters difficult to comprehend, but it also made the various colors, and specifically the characters on screen, pop out even more. We're first introduced to E2, another cute little droid who shows he's more than capable of defending himself later on in the episode. And then we meet Lola, as she awakens from a bad dream. Other than the fact that she's a painter struggling to block out the darkness, the overall story was a bit vague to begin the episode, but I liked the way it came full circle and connected with her trying to distance herself from the Sith and her time as one. And then she eventually acknowledges that it will always be a part of her. The symbolism and deeper meanings in this one were very interesting, and were the strongest aspect of it in my opinion. The music was another strong aspect of the episode. We get to hear a few themes as the scale of the story expands when the Sith Master arrives on the planet. I did find it a bit confusing as to whether or not Lola forgot her lightsaber when she left the base. I think it would have benefited maybe from one quick shot as she speeds away that lingers on the hilt left behind, just to make it obvious to the audience. We get to see more of the planet, which was neat, and then we're introduced to the Sith Master and two other soldiers. Overall, I thought the character designs were all really cool, and felt like nothing we'd ever seen before. The action was all exciting, between the speeder chase and then the lightsaber duel later on, but I did find the shifting setting of that duel to be a bit distracting for me. It felt like it was constantly moving or changing as the two characters dueled, and for me it took away from the scene as a whole. And then it ends with Lola accepting her darkness, finishing a beautiful painting, and going out to create a life for herself. Next, with Screecher's Reach. This one had moments that I enjoyed, but overall I just don't think it was for me. We open up at some kind of child labor camp, and this episode was all 2D animation, which I got excited for because it's more in line with a lot of the cartoons that I grew up watching, so I thought that would help me relax and enjoy it more. Doll's wheel breaks, and then she takes off to find another life. The episode gave us enough information for the rest of the story to make sense, but I think it would have benefited from more exposition before this inciting incident. It all felt rushed, and by the time Doll and her friends leave for Screecher's Reach, I still didn't even know the character or care about this adventure at all. I did like, though, how each of them felt different from one another. We take some time to get to know all of them at the campfire, and it's obvious that there's a deep connection between these people. They've known each other, and they've suffered together, and now they all have this time to have fun and enjoy life away from work. We eventually arrive at the cave, and the ghost was actually a little scary when it first appeared. Everything with the character design and animation was done well to contrast her from the normal person we're used to here, and gives her a more terrifying appearance. Doll had some good character development here as she overcomes her fear to strike down the woman, but in my opinion, it could have easily ended right there, with Doll returning to her friends. It would have obviously left out the fact that she wanted a different life for herself, but the ending here just felt like it came out of nowhere. I'll admit I was curious about the medallion and its significance, but it being connected to this master that appears and takes Doll away to train her, that ending just didn't stick for me. And even though it was set up to be an emotional goodbye between her and her friends, with a reassuring nod from Bathan, I didn't know these characters well enough to have any strong emotional reaction. Next, Within the Stars, this one immediately caught my attention from the trailers because of the stop-motion animation. I enjoyed this one quite a bit, even though I didn't exactly love how the story ended. The beginning of the episode was very powerful and engrossing, with the stars and the contrast to the life and death as soon as the TIE fighter becomes visible. Other than the stop motion, which I thought looked really good for a majority of the scenes, I think the connection to the Empire helped me create context around the story, so it didn't feel like such an isolated episode, helping me enjoy it all more. I also really enjoyed the dynamic between Kotin and Chichina, the two sisters native to the planet. You've got the older one, who is able to remember more of what life used to be and what was taken by the Empire. She's been hardened into a survivor because she witnessed the destruction of her homeworld and the loss of her mother, the role which she now has to presume in relation to her younger sister, Tichina. She, on the other hand, is much more of an idealist, a dreamer. She hasn't taken on the same responsibility that her sister has since her mother's death, so her focus is still on remembering their mother and the life that once was. The exposition with the cave wall did feel a bit forced, but the way in which it was done was enthralling, and it did so much to make me care about these characters in the world. It helped us to see the emotional layers to these characters, why Kotin is the way she is, and how the Empire came in and ruined the world, why it's so grey and dull. The story then leads to the Empire's base, as Kotin needs to steal more water, and while much of the episode looked good, the action with the stop motion didn't look as interesting or flow as well compared to some of the other shorts. And eventually, Tichina constantly disobeying Kotin got boring for me, especially when she's proven that she's incapable of defending herself. I get that she's the idealist of the two, the positive sister, but after she did it so many times it just got old, where by the time we got to the end, I didn't really care anymore. The characters came full circle as Tichina was able to open Kotin back up to the Force and get her to see the light again, but there was something about the execution of it that I didn't find myself enjoying. But the sisters are able to defeat the Empire and restore their world to its natural glory, and the world and music were both beautiful. I definitely had questions about the water going into toxic waste and the pollution clearing up, but it's possible to look past all of these inaccuracies at the end. I Am Your Mother was a bit on the shorter side, but it was still a cute story that was hard not to enjoy. Like the name suggests, it really focuses on this mother-daughter relationship between Annie and her mom, and there's a lot of it that is really relatable for anyone. The idea of growing apart from your parents as you get older, and certain aspects of your life that you want to hide to maintain your pride and social image. These are all relatable things that nearly everyone has dealt with at some point in their lifetime. Who hasn't been embarrassed by their parents on one occasion or another? These themes in the relationship between characters is what makes Annie such an interesting and compelling protagonist despite barely spending 10 minutes with her. We get just enough details about her and this family to the point where every development in the plot means something. Z1 accidentally playing that clip of them flying together when she is younger. It sort of feels out of place in the moment, but it's hard for me to care about that when the details like the Ryloth roll and call signs for each other come into play later on as they're flying together in the family race, and they make the moment mean so much more for these characters and their arcs in the episode. Some of the other characters in the episode are a bit one-sided, but it's all enough to get the points across. The Van Riepels are your typical, upper-class, snotty, competitive antagonists that serve their purpose in the episode. It would have been nice to get maybe a little more from some of the other cadets, but what we did get from those characters was enjoyable, especially the Wookiee family during the race. I'm not sure if this is set on any specific planet. There weren't many basic details since it isn't a part of canon, but it was nice to see so many different Easter eggs throughout the episode, like familiar species and ships. You've got the luxury yacht, a similar design to that of the Stinger Mantis from Fallen Order, and there's an X-Wing and Naboo diplomatic barge that can also be spotted. And of course, Wedge Antilles. I was expecting him to have a larger impact on the story in the episode, but honestly I don't mind him just being a side character, with a few appearances. It never felt like the story needed that connective tissue to be interesting or make sense. Whereas some of these episodes feel lost and don't make sense without some connection to a larger story or era, this was a perfect little story that fits in on its own. Next, Journey to the Dark Head. I think I'm still kind of in the middle on this one. It had some good aspects to it, but also some parts that I didn't enjoy or didn't make sense. It deals with the mechanic and a Jedi Padawan being sent on a mission together, and a lot of this didn't make sense to me until much later on in the episode. First off, I didn't realize until the very end that the mechanic was supposed to be the little girl from the opening scene. Maybe that's just on me, but I don't feel like it was made apparent until the vision from the rock comes true, and we get the short flashback. Choosing the rocks felt similar to Jedi choosing kyber crystals on Ilum, which may have been on purpose, but there was so much about the opening scene, and the specific details about this location and the gift that I feel was rushed over, where I really never understood it until much later on. All I got out of it was that there's a war between the Jedi and the Sith, and these people, whoever they are keeping these visions of the future to themselves. But since this girl, Era, cares so much about using these visions to help the Jedi turn the tide of the war when she's young, I found it odd that it was never a point brought up later on. There's then the time jump, which I didn't really catch on into the moment, and at the time the Jedi Council meeting was interesting, getting to see all of these different people. But once we learn later on that this person is just a mechanic, I don't understand how she's able to request a mission from the Council, or why she even needs to when later on she says she doesn't even need a Jedi for the mission. Maybe I missed something, or my canon thinking is getting in the way here. But other than those critiques, there were aspects that I enjoyed here. Both characters were very interesting and able to be developed into complex individuals in a short span of time. Some of the dialogue sounded weird at certain points, and I didn't love the way the episode wrapped up after the action had finished, but otherwise the two main characters did a good job at leading the story on. The animation took a bit to get used to, but I loved some of the settings and just the mood that they gave off, and the action looked decent too. Some points were better than others, but it never brought the episode down in my eyes. The Spy Dancer was one that I was really looking forward to because of what I had heard about the story. So much of Star Wars is based on real historical events, and I really liked how this one is inspired by the French Resistance in World War II. It's not necessary in order to understand the episode, and it would still be an enjoyable viewing without this knowledge, but knowing that information and inspiration beforehand made me appreciate the episode so much more. Other than that, I was kind of split on the episode. I wasn't a huge fan of the specific story for much of the episode, with Loe going after the Imperial officer only to discover that it wasn't the one she was thinking of. It wasn't the same one that stole her child all those years ago. However, once it was revealed that the Imperial was actually her son, it all started to make sense to me, and I understood why these decisions were made. The reveal completely caught me off guard, but it made so much more sense that way. For much of the episode, I just looked past the fact that the Imperial took her child away, because I assumed Hatise was her daughter, and everything had sort of worked itself out. It wasn't my favorite animation style, but I think it did work for this specific episode, especially the dance performances, allowing it all to feel much more majestic. I loved the music, and how unique it all sounds, and its ability to amplify the tone throughout the episode. And like I mentioned earlier, the story is based off of World War II, so I enjoyed having the wartime feel of it all, especially during the opening moments. It really set the tone for the episode, knowing that the Empire was everywhere on this planet. Next, the Bandits of Golak completely blew me away. I had heard positive reactions to it, but I was amazed at how good it was. First off, the animation was strikingly good. It had stood out to me as having one of those better animation designs of the series, but I was caught off guard when it first cuts into the train and shows all of the different species. It looks amazing, and it was all very detailed, whether it be the characters or the space around them. We're introduced to Raini and Sharuk, and between their sibling bond and struggles together, I immediately became endeared by them, to the point where 15 minutes later, I was getting emotional having to see them go their own ways. I was a little surprised when I realized that the bandits in the title were just referring to them, and not what I assumed was going to be a band of rebels that attacked the train, but I'm glad we got to spend so much time with these two characters. They really do feel like close siblings here, out on their own with no parents, and the reveal that Raini is Force-sensitive kicks off the story. It was a bit puzzling why she was so quick to use the Force sometimes, as if she was never told about what it could cost her. I get that she's young, but I feel like growing up in the Empire, someone in her family or community would have kept a close eye on her to ensure that she never used it out in the open where others might see her. Because as it happens here, the Empire catches wind of it and pursues her. I was expecting a few Imperials to come after them, so the reveal that it was an Inquisitor and 2 Purge troopers really made me excited. He had such a menacing tone to him, and I liked how he felt different from some of the other Inquisitors we've met in canon, but he still felt like one of them. The action throughout the episode was solid, with the various attacks on the train, but this lightsaber fight really elevated the episode. I had assumed that the old woman was a Jedi as soon as we got the shot where she focuses in on Raini lifting the plates, but the duel between them looked incredible and was a joy to watch. and then we get a heartfelt goodbye as Ronnie is taken by the other Force sensitives. I was amazed that I felt so much for these characters that I had only met 15 minutes earlier, but when the two of them have to say goodbye, it really hit me hard. And one last thing, maybe it was the deeper cultural influence here, but the music really stood out to me in a positive way here. Every time there was a new theme in the background, it served a purpose. For the pit, even though I liked the overall basis of the story, with the Empire using people to mine and abandoning them afterward, there wasn't else much here that I enjoyed. The first 4 minutes or so focus on life in Imperial service, and the harsh reality it brings with it. These people work constantly, mining on a barren planet, and anything they find belongs to the Empire. And then once their usefulness is up, they're left in the bottom of a pit while the Empire sits comfortably in their brand new city. And with all of these people trapped underground, they don't expect anyone to find out about these atrocities. This all felt very similar to what we've seen from the Empire in canon, which is why I enjoyed the beginning so much. But as the episode went on, I didn't find anything else to latch onto, really. We didn't get to learn much about any of these characters, so it was hard to care about any of them all that much. Crex's death really caught me off guard, and made the episode take a much darker turn. But even then, I barely knew this guy, and never had any strong reaction to his death. The overall idea of the people coming to their rescue was nice, but I wasn't a fan of how it came about. I'm not going to keep picking this one apart, but overall there was just a lot with the story that I didn't enjoy as much as some of the other episodes. And lastly, Aw's song. This one is right up there with the Bandits of Golak in terms of above-average episodes in my opinion, ones that are worth going back to see again. This episode's strength, in my opinion, was the animation. Everything from the scenery to the characters and the Kyber crystals, it was all beautiful, and I really liked how vibrant and colorful the entire world was, compared to a lot of these other episodes, which had a much darker and gloomier feel to them. The few photos I saw of this episode before watching it made me think that it was going to look like a stuffed animal walking around for 15 minutes, but I was surprised at how good everything was animated. Aw's connection to the Kyber was a bit confusing, and why exactly she was able to purify them all, but I think I'm just able to chalk it up to her being strong of the Force and make do with that. But the visuals when she did purify all of the crystals, and really the crystals in just about every scene they were in, looked great. I also really enjoyed the relationship between father and daughter. I didn't notice myself growing attached to them throughout the episode, but just like in the Bandits of Golak, them going their different paths at the end did make me feel something that few of the other episodes were able to. Let me know what you thought of all these episodes in the comments below. Which one was your favorite? Remember to like the video, and subscribe for more reviews like this. And remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you. Always.